All right, welcome everybody to ResV. Coach Reslow here, continuing on season 2 of the interview series, and I have another great coach with me today. And he and I are going to talk some volleyball, some processes, some recruiting. I'm going to pick his brain because I didn't get a chance to when he was at Johnson and Wales. Coach Noordzy, welcome to ResV. This is the head coach, Salve Regina. How you doing, man?
Doing great, Rez. Thanks for having me on this YouTube podcast thing.
Yeah, I don't even know how it happened. Like between you and me, Seb, and everyone watching, it was one of those things where I started deciding that I wanted to talk to everybody and I wanted to learn from as many coaches as I can. And it just sort of took off a little bit. And certainly I get a couple of views here, a couple of views there. I mean, we're not breaking world records here, but we are putting some good volleyball knowledge out there.
Yeah, and the people you talk to and the people who listen are gaining like a ton of good nuggets from all of
So.
this. And that's worth its weight in gold.
Agreed. Like I've actually been surprised sometimes at the number of views, being lower than I suspected. Like, I'm kind of looking around, going, do you realize who I've actually got on the on the line here? Like, Charlie Sullivan, Nancy
Oh yeah.
Samara. Like these are really really good coaches, not just kind of good coaches, like really good coaches. And we're
Oh, you have
picking
the
their
heavy
brain.
hitters on there.
Yeah. And we're picking their brains and they're giving us information. And I was like, dude, those numbers should be higher up if you realized who I was actually, fortunate enough to talk to. So, man, I think you're on your way. You're doing a real nice job. You guys are off to a good start here. Is this season 3 for you?
So yes, and it always kind of blends in because I got hired at Salve February 2020. And if you
Oh yeah.
remember back there, it was basically a month after I got hired. I was told to work from home, and it was my first head coaching gig. And I was like, how do I? All right, let me figure out this working from home thing, and let me figure
Mm.
out this head coaching thing at home. So it's kind of all blended together. But yes, third season. We're in our brand new conference, the new MAC conference, and we're kind of doing some really good things this year. So it's been a good year. It's been pretty fun so far, and we're hoping to keep that ball rolling.
Yeah, I was looking at the records of all the Division 3 schools, women's volleyball in Rhode Island, and you're the top of the heap right now. Jay Wu is a little bit down. Roger Williams is having a year, and then
Yep.
Rick is about 500, I believe. So certainly you guys are in a good spot. But that new MAC conference, that's a tough one. You guys got your work cut out for you there. But back to 2020. I don't know how I mean, 2020 is when Johnson Wales men's volleyball dissolved and really the birthplace of ResV.
Yep.
But I don't know how you become a new head coach and work from home. Like that's just astonishing. Like you know, obviously you're still there and you're still happy. I got to think that your management, your administrators were really really understanding because that was an impossible situation.
Yeah, and at the time, the Salve job was a part-time gig, so that was very high on my priority list of just managing a team and a season and being a head coach. Um, but I think on the pantheon of things, it was lower on the list for our administration, just because it was the part-time gig, it wasn't full-time, a little bit less pieces to manage.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was a time. It was a time for sure.
I bet you most of your time was dealing with athletes and their emotions during an unbelievable situation. I mean, I can't. Again, I even as I was leaving, our program had dissolved, and I was no longer employed due to the pandemic. I was still contacting quote unquote now former players on my roster, making sure they were okay, and a lot of them were really in a bad way, pretty upset.
Yeah, I got to know the athletes kind of at a personal level before even seeing them in the gym, which is kind of
Mm,
cool. Because we had not had spring practices yet. I had one meeting, one individual with each one of the kids. And then the pandemic happened, and then it was all kind of on Zoom. So we would do different things, like we'd have, class Zoom meetings and position Zoom meetings and big group Zoom meetings.
mm.
So we got to know the kids a little bit more personal as opposed to like them as athletes, which was kind of cool. Um, but definitely difficult because it was just a brand new group of faces. It was like 15, 16, 17 faces that I just had no idea where they were, but I got to know them
Yeah.
pretty quick.
Yeah, and I remember when I took over JWU in 2009. Well, it was 2008, 2009. So again, a juxtaposition your situation there in 2020. Like you walk into a whole new team. None of these kids are kids you recruited. None of these kids know you very, very well. And then just to double the impact, you can't see them play or meet them in person for like months on months. Like that's just the more I think about it, wasn't my intention to start off the interview this way, but my mind's like, oh wow, that's unbelievable.
I know. It's a little unique start, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, you did the job, baby. All good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the beginning of your career as a volleyball person. All right. So I know you're out of Bishop Hendricken High School, played some volleyball there. How'd you get into the game?
So growing up, I was always that kid who played every sport imaginable: soccer, basketball, baseball, a little tennis, little, basically anything I can get my hands on. I was just an active kid. I was a big soccer guy. That was my sport. So I go to Bishop Hendricken for non-athletic reasons. I try out for the soccer team there, and I'm like, okay, cool. Let me try out. Tried out as midfielder, I think, which was a bad idea because that summer I had not been training at all.
Oh,
So I got cut from the freshman team. So I was like, okay, what is a very complicated game? Because my parents are very big soccer people coming from Europe. So, like my dad, for example, was the guy who would always yell, "You're offsides! Get back on sides!" And the refs used to hate him. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, what's a sport that's super complicated that I can make, and my parents won't know anything about the rule set, so they can't yell and complain and coach me on
okay.
the sidelines.
Yeah.
So that happened to be volleyball. So freshman year, I try out for volleyball, and didn't make the team. I was, I hadn't hit my growth spurt yet. I was, again, not really a huge athlete. Kind of the way I moved, I looked like, a newborn deer. Um, and but I really caught the bug. I think I got one big block in tryouts, and I was like, wow, that was a lot of fun. Um, so so I tried to find a way to get better at that sport. Just because, again, I caught the bug. So my actual outside of tryouts kind of competitive or kind of learning phase was through the grass. I went to Wilson Park Wednesdays back when they had it. And I remember
Mm,
Scott Grand Prix was the first guy who pulled me aside, kind of seeing me in the corner, just be like, is this kid going to play? Or like, hey, come over here. Like, you're my
yeah.
partner for right now. And again, I was running around doing circles, not knowing how to play. And Scott Grand Prix, for the elite athlete he is, made it a lot of fun for me, right? Just being a great person, being a great teacher of the game. Learned a lot, played club that winter, tried out again my sophomore year, made the team. Then I went on to, JV sophomore year, varsity the next 2 years, had a very successful team, won 2 state championships both years of my later years in high school. And then after high school, I went to University of Rhode Island, where I played on their club team, which was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and especially in the club world, you have that great balance between being a student, having a social life. Um, there's a lot of ownership in the club scene. Like I was doing kind of quote unquote head coaching stuff, like managing budgets, scheduling, all the things that I'm doing now, I was doing as a college person,
Yeah.
which was, a good learning lesson.
Oh, absolutely. The club thing. I mean, I've worked with it when I was working at NCSA. There was a lot of talk when I would work with clients. Hey, what about if I don't want to play varsity college volleyball? What other options are there? And the idea is, club sports. Hey, club sports can be just as lucrative, just as competitive as varsity sports. And I think you nailed it. Like you said it just perfectly. There is a lot of ownership in that club sports because you don't have like a coaching crew that is pushing you through the situation. Like you either love it and really want to do it, and because you love it, you put the time in, or if it's not your thing, you'll fall off pretty quickly, and you just won't show up, and you'll go on to do other things, whatever those other things are. So it's very interesting that, you know, I used to talk to clients, and I was only there for a year, but I used to talk to clients about how, you know, club sports can be very valuable as well. And it was amazing how many were like, nah, it's not where I want to go. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, it could be really fun, and it can be
Yep.
just as good, and the competition can be really just as good. I mean, you'd be surprised the level that some of the club teams play at, especially big schools. You know, for example, there isn't a men's volleyball team at Michigan, but you could play for the club team and be really have a great experience and probably play some big time volleyball because it's in the Midwest and there's a lot of stuff out there. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
really what you make out of it. Like I was lucky that at URI we had a really good group of people who wanted to get better, wanted to play at a high level. And I mean, we've played you guys at Johnson and Wales. It was good competitive matches. So it really is what you make of it. If you want it to be a learning experience and a good growth opportunity, then you can make it a learning experience and a great growth opportunity. If you want it to just be something to do on a weekend, you know, that's also something you can do.
Possible. Yeah. But that's a great life lesson. Like, I mean, any situation you're in, whatever you make of it is how it's gonna turn out, right? Like if you don't see the value in it and you have no interest in really putting time in and working on getting better, then it's going to be sort of a flop situation for you. But if you take every situation and really, you know, devote some time and thought and really embrace it, who knows what can happen. So
yeah, for sure.
And then from graduating URI, I know you I remember the stint where you were with Nancy for a year at JWU.
Yeah, so after college, I coached, you know, just various different boys and girls programs around the state. High school at SK, LaSalle, Exeter, West Greenwich, you know, just kind of all over the map. But then, just kind of as I'm going through, I'm like, okay, I really enjoy coaching. I think I want to, you know, make it a career, and the way to do that is mostly through college coaching. So I needed my foot in the door. And then I was in a men's league in Newport with Andy Cass, who was the assistant coach at Johnson Wales at the time. He was saying, hey, we're looking for a volunteer, someone to get it. And I was like, yep, I'm in. Let me learn. Let me get in. And that's been a huge blessing for me, just because, I mean, Nancy's one of the greats. Yeah, they gave her coach of the year for a reason. She turned that program around really for a reason.
My favorite part is that she took that award and didn't know it was Karch Karai who was giving it to her.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Oh, that was the best part. She comes back and she has pictures and we're just like, oh, it's great. And then of course I look at it, go, oh wow, Karch. Like Karch gave you the it was really cool. She's like, oh, that who it was? I had no idea.
Yeah.
This is just some dude.
Oh my God, that's awesome. But yeah, so she's been such a great resource for me, just making that transition. Really taught me how to coach and how to, you know, recruit and game plan and do all the office work at a very high level, to get to the steps that, you know, I want to get to, which is, you know, very competitive, very high level. So no, that was a phenomenal year of learning and growth. And I'm glad I got to pick Nancy's brain a bunch.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, like you've played for arguably, in my opinion, the top high school coach for boys in Mike Harrington. I think he's top tier in Rhode Island for boys high school volleyball. And then, you know, we're both in agreement that Nancy Samaro's top tier as a college coach. So you got to really get two excellent people to learn from in terms of the play and then the coaching style and all that stuff. And you're able to take it and apply it to your career right now at Salve, which, you know, it is, I think, again, described it perfectly. It's a blessing to be able to meet those people, get that information, and then be able to take it and utilize it. So it's really fortunate and good stuff for you, and really good on you to take a volunteer gig. A lot of people, especially today's world, you know, they want to get paid. You know, I mean, look, we all want to get paid. Yep. I mean, sure, money matters. Like, I'm not going to go on that route and say it doesn't. But it does take a leap of faith to be a volunteer somewhere and do something, you know, without getting a monetary value to it. and then understanding that that volunteership can lead to something bigger. So really cool stuff there. And how'd you guys do in that JWU year? Probably won it.
Yeah, we I could not tell you our record. I know we've lost to some really, really good teams. Like we played Emory, who was a top 5 team. We played Juniata, who was, I don't know, probably top 10, top
They're
15
always top
that
10. Yeah.
year. Yep. So we got to see some really high level ball. We won GNAX. I mean, we had an awesome team. We had All American just across the board. We had some good depth on the roster. So practices were always fiery and back and forth. We beat Riviere in the GNAC finals, and then we went on to NCAA's at Tufts University. Beat Maine Maritime first round, then played a good gritty match against Babson in the regional semifinal, which was a phenomenal match. Just such a cool high level game.
Yeah.
And then we unfortunately lost to Bowdoin in that regional final, but being like what that would be the Sweet 16 equivalent, like not many teams get to say that. And it was, again, it was just such a cool experience just being at that high level and be like, okay, so this is what NCAA tournament is like.
This is what it's really like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you caught the interview I did with Nancy, but one of the things, I've been starting to write stories, and I wrote a story about Kevin Harrington, which went over pretty well. And I think the next one I want to do is this idea of what happened in Rhode Island volleyball when the Samaras arrived, right? Like you had, I mean, certainly Ben was there at Roger Williams, and he turned them into a pretty good power, and then he left to go to Wesleyan. But then, Nancy comes to Johnson and Wales. All of a sudden, Jay Wu, who had won a couple GNACs, but never really got out of the starting blocks for NCAA tournament and national rankings. All of a sudden, she brings them to the top 5 team in the country. And then you have, people that have worked for her that have gone on to be very successful, like yourself, like Jamal Diggs. I would put myself in that category because she was a mentor to me for about 5 or 6 years. So, you have this moment where these two people arrive, and then you could add that, Miley was a very good player for Barrington. Now she's playing at Yale. And it was kind of like those two people arrived, and the level of Rhode Island volleyball just started to rise. And Bryant became pretty good. Brown became pretty good. Like it's sort of just an interesting little, I don't know, circumstance. And I think that's a good story. And I think I'm going to write about it.
If you ever need a quote, I'm your guy.
Sounds good. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about where you guys are at right now, right? So you're 9-5. You're entering the new MAC. Well, I think you've played 3, you've dropped 3, but they've been good games. Did you realize when you entered the new conference this was going to be a pretty strong hurdle to figure out?
Yeah. So the difference between new MAC and some of the other conferences is the new MAC from top to bottom is really, really good. There's no gimme games, at least not at our level. And we're playing teams that are receiving votes or nationally ranked. Like we played MIT Tuesday, I believe it was. And we played them in a very tough match, but just seeing the caliber of athletes that they have at that school, I mean, everyone's, 6 foot tall, jumping well, bombing balls, incredible ball skills, and just the way that they prepare. And that's kind of across the NUMAC. The way that NUMAC schools prepare is a little bit different than some of the other schools. So there's, again, no gimme games. Every game you get to is going to be a challenge. Whereas in some other conferences, there's a lower level of programs where you might be like, okay, we're just not going to play our starters for this game because of the level that some other programs are.
You have those bottom tiers. Yeah, you have those bottom tiers in other conferences where those teams are in building mode, and sometimes they're in building mode for a long time. Like they're just not able to gather the athletes that they need. But the NUMAC, yeah, you're right. I mean, MIT, they were ranked the #1 college in the United States last year. So like their recruiting pool is gigantic. And then add the fact that Paul Dill is an outstanding coach who really gets his team to play at high levels and do great stuff. So like I mean, MIT is a giant hurdle, certainly.
Yep.
But yeah, from top to bottom, you got to get you got to get your ducks in a row because it's going to be hard.
Yep,
So
yep. So we prepared all, preseason and early season for these new Mac matches. And we're going to keep on learning from them. Because again, this is all brand new to us for the most part. Like we've played MIT, we've played Babson, we've played all these schools, but we haven't played them in conference matches.
right,
So
beforehand they were just setups for the conference. Like, hey, we're
yep,
gonna go out
yep,
of system, excuse me, out of conference play, and then we're gonna get some lessons learned. Then we're gonna bring it into conference and start wrecking shop. And now
yep.
those are your
Yeah.
conference.
So it's eye-opening for everyone. Like the athletes see that and be like, okay, well, that's the standard of the new Mac. How do we get there? Our coaching staff is okay, that's the standard of the new Mac. How do we recruit to that? How do we build our program? How do we do X, Y, Z? That way, next time we see them, it's a closer match and a closer match, and then we're beating them, and then now we're top dogs in the new Mac.
Cool.
So we're searching for that standard, and we're searching to break it, and be a really good name around places.
So how does your recruiting strategy change as now you have this goal to deal with the new Mac, level of play? Like I mean, I guess let's take a step backward. What is your recruiting strategy? How do you recruit players? And then now how has that changed now that you're dealing with a different conference that's a higher level?
So we've been working to systematize it a little bit more, just to start building deeper connections and really getting to know the athletes and seeing if they fit in to what we're trying to do. Because there are some pretty good athletes that just kind of want to be involved in something and don't necessarily want to put in the work, which is whatever. But we're looking for people who want to work hard, they want to grow, they want to be competitive, and those are the people that we feel will fit. So we're really trying to do our best to weed out the people who don't want to put in the work and the people who do want to grow and be competitive. We're really trying to recruit to our strengths at Salve. One of the things that is unique to our campus is we're in Newport, Rhode Island, which is kind of a small city, but it's got a lot of liveliness to it. We're right by the ocean, right by the beaches, beautiful sights. We've got great nursing and great education. So kind of, we have majors that lead to jobs directly. You graduate Salve from with a nursing degree, you're pretty good to get into a nursing job. So we try to recruit to that. And then we try to recruit, again, the best athletes we can, because you need the horses to be able to pull the wagon.
Absolutely. If I think I said this numerous times in many interviews, but I'll say it again because it's worth noting. Like, you can be the best X's and O's coach in the whole planet, but if you don't have the horses to make it work, it doesn't matter. So what would you say? Like, your pins need to be about 6 feet. Pin 6 feet, middle 6'2", and have a setter that's about 5'10" who can block, or
yep, and liberos who are just chasing balls all over the place. No, and there's I don't think there's a perfect volleyball roster, unless it's 6'5" across the board. We've had a lot of success with 5'7" outsides who have great ball control and pretty springy with live arms. We've had success with some taller kids. We've had success with kids who aren't the best athletes, but they're so skilled and so creative that they're able to score points in just a variety of different ways. So we're not necessarily looking to recruit in a box, like square peg and square hole. We're looking to recruit the best athletes that make our gym more competitive. We're looking to teach and help them grow within themselves, and figure out the best way they as individuals can play at that high level in the new Mac. And again, it does help being very tall. As someone who was pretty tall, and I know that volleyball gets a little bit easier the taller you are.
Can't teach height.
You can't teach height, but we don't have any requirements that say you got to be
Yeah.
6 foot tall to play this position. Again, it helps to be 6 foot tall, but if you're a 5'9" kid and you got a live arm, and you score points, then yeah, you'd be on the floor.
Are there any particular regions that you're really focusing in, or is the whole country a possibility? Because I remember when I was coaching at the college level, you want to win your backyard. Like, you definitely want to make sure that you get any good player that's in your state. So, if you find somebody who's playing at elite level in Rhode Island, you want to have them. And then from there, we tried to get to, if we could bring any California kids, we tried to get that accomplished. If we could bring any Puerto Rican kids, we tried to get that accomplished. Midwest, Chicago, we're trying to get outside of the New England region, mainly because it killed two birds with one stone, in the sense that, number one, oftentimes those kids are playing more volleyball because actually weather related, they can play year round, as opposed to what happens in New England, though I doubt anybody is playing beach volleyball in Chicago in the December months. There's no way they're doing
Not
that.
outdoors, at least.
But then the other thing too is that it spread the brand, right? Like, if you could get Johnson of Wales, or in your case, Salve Regina, in the minds of a club in California, or a club in Puerto Rico, or a club in Florida, you get that name out there, that name recognition, then all of a sudden, maybe you get another kid or two that you didn't think was coming, because they know about Johnson of Wales, or they know about Salve Regina, or they know about Wesleyan, or they know about whomever, MIT. Well, MIT is really easy. Everyone knows what MIT.
Everyone knows that.
But you get my meaning there. Like,
Yep.
The more you can get out of region, oftentimes the better the fruit's going to be when it comes in, just because they've played longer, and you've created a networking situation.
Yeah, and we're definitely doing a lot of that. We have a team full of kids from all over. Granted, a lot of them are from the Northeast, because Salve is a more recognizable name in the Northeast.
Right.
But we have kids from Minnesota, Kentucky. We've had kids from Florida, North Carolina, just kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
We find that we do very well in kind of that New York, New Jersey area, because it's a little bit closer to home than some of these other schools. And it's a little bit further away than some of the other schools. So it's kind of that nice little niche between, like, oh, I want to go away for college, but I want to be able to come back home.
Right.
And so we're looking to really hit those areas really well. But again, if you're a kid and you are very interested in going to a beautiful school on the ocean, and you're a very good player, then absolutely we'll have conversations to recruit.
Yeah, you're always hoping for that one moment where you get a kid that you've never seen before walk in your gym, and you're like, yeah. Like, yeah. I remember when Jeff Outram walked into LaSalle's gym, and LaSalle and Coach Olson was like, I didn't recruit Jeff, he just showed up. And it was like, what? Like, the dude just showed up, because Outram had played a year at what was the school? At Elms. Like, he had played a year there, and he was okay, but then he didn't like it or something, and he just showed up at LaSalle. Like, no talking, no recruiting, no nothing. It's just like an All-American walking in the door without you even having to do any work. I mean, that's the perfect. That never happens, but when it does, it's glorious.
Oh, that's the dream.
It is the dream. It is the dream. So I know you're also involved in South County, like myself, for club volleyball. Talk a little bit about that and your facet there, and what you enjoy about it, and the value of playing club.
Yeah, so I've been with South County from the very beginning. I remember I had, kind of different opportunities in the club space. But when Mike Harrington called me, he was just like, hey, I got this 14s team. All right, I'm sold. We practice here. All right, I'm sold. It's like, we have this opportunity. And I'm like, Harry, I already told you like 5 times, I'm in. So from the very beginning, I've been a part of South County, mostly towards the 14s through 16s range, but I've helped out with many group of teams, even working with the boys program for a year. And it's been awesome. I really enjoy a lot of the things we do at South County. I enjoy seeing Rhode Island volleyball get better. I enjoy being a part of that. And I think it's just been immensely great for my personal coaching growth, as well as seeing all the kids get better. And that's kind of across the board. Like, we remember when North Kingstown was a powerhouse, and they still are, but when they had their 89-0 or whatever win record, the majority of those kids were playing South County, when a lot of the rest of the state had like one or two kids playing. And now there's not as much parity. It's kind of really competitive across the state because a lot of these kids are playing club volleyball, which is,
Right.
It's so fun to go to the NK-SK game and see SK take North to 5. Whereas during that 89-0 record, wasn't happening all that often.
No one was coming close, really. Yeah. But what's the value for a student athlete to play club? Like, what's I want you to talk to that about that a little bit, because I think there are some. I mean, the problem with club volleyball, and this is full stop. This is the number one problem. It costs money, right? Like, it's not cheap. Like, you got to invest some money in it, and excuse me, and that's tough for families, especially during economic times that aren't great. So you have this situation. Like, we're about to do tryouts for South County boys. It's coming up this weekend, next weekend, and the following weekend. I think it's the 3 weekends in a row. And we're gonna make evaluations, we're gonna set up teams, we're gonna do all that stuff. But before anything gets going, all those families are gonna get the bill, and the bill is not gonna be fun. So what is what's the value in playing in that? Like, how would you describe that?
It's, I'm not going to describe it in one word, because there's not one word to describe it. There's so many great pieces to playing club. And again, depending on what your goals are, if your goals are to make your varsity team, there's, teams and opportunities to help achieve that goal. If your goal is to go on and play collegiately, there's teams and opportunities to achieve that goal. So just putting yourself in a position, trying out, learning from really good coaches, practicing in the off season, putting in that work to help achieve your goals is immense. We all know the value of sports. If your goal is to, again, make that varsity team, and you're a little behind, or you want to just make sure you're for sure that person, if you put in the work, it just teaches so much lessons about how how things really given, and you got to kind of go out and take it. Another thing that I really enjoy is just the opportunities to learn from other people, and not even just from a volleyball sense, but you have teammates from all walks of life on your team. From North Kingstown, South Kingstown, East Greenwich, Cumberland, all over the map in Rhode Island, coming from different coaching styles, and you have to learn how to interact with those different peoples. But then you also have to learn how to interact with new coaches. And a lot of our gyms have, 2, 3, 4, 5 different coaches in there. So how to interact with different coaches, how to interact with college coaches if you're going through the recruiting process. So it's great learning and doing stuff that you're going to have to do in your adult life. You're going to have to talk to all different people. You're going to have to get along with them. And that's just, it teaches you that in a different way than, say, a high school sport would. Because high school, you usually have gone to school with your teammates since you were, I don't know, 5, 6, 7. So teaches you a little bit different of how to interact with people, which is cool.
Yeah. I think it's vastly important. I think you nailed it there, in the sense that, you are going to be working with different types of people, different cultures, different experiences, different beginnings, and you got to be able to figure out a way to work and not only, this is going to sound awful, but put up with them or deal with them, but actually be successful as a team. Because what ends up happening is, you have to, as with most sports, like, you have to put your personal ego aside and do what's best for the team. And a lot of times it's very hard for youngsters to figure that out. And quite frankly, it's hard for anybody to figure out. We're complex human beings, and we're always worried about self and what's going to happen to us, and what are we going to get? What are we going to do? What's going to, what can we win or take or earn? And it takes some learning to be like, hey, I may want to hit the ball 30 times in this match, but we're not going to win if I hit the ball 30 times. Like, we're actually going to win if I hit it 15 and then my opposite hits it 15 and my middle gets 8 swings. And everyone, instead of me averaging 5 kills per set, everyone averages 1.9 or 2. We're going to win the game, as opposed to me getting all the kills. So I mean, it's a really kind of brutal example.
Yeah.
I could have done it better, but the point of the story is that teamwork and learning how that works, and that's going to benefit you in the rest of your life. You know, when you get out of college and when you have to get a job, and understanding, hey, we have to do it all. We all have to separate ourselves and buy into what's happening so that we can all be successful versus just the one.
Yeah, and that often team success often breeds individual success.
Agreed. It goes back around.
Yep. If you're a team that's winning all these crazy matches because everyone's getting, 2 kills per set as opposed to one kid getting 10 kills per set, you're gonna end up playing higher and higher competition just because of the funnel that club tournaments create. And that's usually where the coaches gravitate towards. They want to see all those teams. And if you're on a team that's winning a bunch of games and you're giving up some stat numbers to win, you're going to get noticed.
Yeah. The exposure aspect of it is, I think that's the most important part of club. I think it's the one that needs to be sort of verbalized to parents when they have to pay the bill, which is, hey, listen, the exposure that your child's going to get to college coaches is going to be far vast than what you're going to get at high school. Because the game, I mean, you and I both know, financially, it doesn't make sense to go, unless it's in your backyard. It doesn't make sense to go to high school teams and watch them play at their high school gym. Like, you're not going to pay $400 to get on a plane to go to a Kentucky high school gym to watch a kid play. You're either going to watch it on video, or you're going to catch that person at a club event, whether it's nationals, whether it's some regional event, whether it's what have you. Like, that's what you're going to spend your money on, because quite frankly, the recruiting budgets, we don't have UCLA recruiting budgets. You're not going to have, and forgive me, I don't know what UCLA's recruiting budget is. I suspect it's high, but I don't know for certain. But I do know at the Division III level, when I was there, it was not a lot. So you had to be very strategic on how you use that money. And it was all club based. Like, you're going to the club, that's where you're going to see those kids play. And your point's spot on. Hey, the better we do, the better we play. You're going to be in day 3 playing in some sort of playoff match. You're going to look around the court and there's going to be people everywhere, and that's the exposure, because you as a team are successful, and hopefully you're working as a team and doing some cool things, and it's going to lead to more exposure.
Yep. Yeah. All Americans don't come from and whatever teams. They come from winning teams.
That's true. Very rarely. I can't recall an 0-12 team having an All-American on their team. So you certainly have to do that. Cool, man. All good conversation. So what's next for you guys? So who do you play next? Who's coming on the horizon?
We have Clark we have a tri-match at Clark this coming Saturday. NewMac match followed by Western New England, a non-conference match, former CCC rivals of ours. Then we go until November 4th is our last regular season game. And then, hopefully we can pick up a few more wins in conference and get to playoffs and see how far we can get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with all my interviews, I always have a couple of questions that I sort of throw at college coaches. So I'll do the same here, and feel free to think about it before you answer. But certainly, if you got an answer, it's great. The first thing is what do you think is something that a coach should know that they probably don't?
Ooh, that's a great one. The advice that kind of has stuck with me through my coaching career was actually from Wayne Hawley. I took a coaching clinic with him in New Jersey, like a beach clinic or something. But
wait a minute.
I know.
That's awesome. Wayne Hawley coached at Charahoe, and he's right in our back door, but you went to see him in New Jersey.
Yeah. So So after he left Charahoe, I forgot exactly what he did, but he ended up in the
Excuse me.
beach world, Division
Yep.
One, I
Yep.
believe Tulane or whatever. But he was doing beach clinics,
Right
and
at the
I
beginning
wanted to,
too. Yeah.
yeah, yep.
Mm.
So it was funny. We chatted about like, hey, your high school team played my high school team in a state championship game. He was like, oh, no way.
Yeah.
But so the advice he gave me in this clinic was, what kind of coach are you if you can only coach the good kids, the kids with the good
Mm.
attitudes, the skilled
Mm.
kids? Um, my biggest piece of coaching advice is you got to be able to coach to each individual athlete. And oftentimes the kids with the quote unquote bad attitude have circumstances or need a little bit something different. And the master coaches are the coaches who can meet those kids where they're at. And yes, some kids are going to be tougher just because personalities don't always mesh with each other. But that's your job as a coach. Your job as a coach is to meet them where they are and figure out what their motivations are and how to get them to where they want to go. Which, once I heard that, I was like, yeah, no, Wayne, you're absolutely right on this.
Yeah, I read Red Auerbach's book, and so he penned it probably I want to say in the late 1960s. But it was all about his time as the head coach of the Boston Celtics, and there's a lot of neat things in there if you're a basketball guy, and or especially if you're a Celtic fan. Like there's a lot of cool stuff in there. But the one thing that it just parallels what you just described is he talked about, and it's kind of famous now, how he would go in after every practice and after every game and talk to each player on his team, and he would direct his verbiage differently for each guy. So like for, and I can't remember the specifics, but for one particular player, he would be polite. For another particular player, he would be coarse. For another particular player, he would be, sort of teasing or, borderline insulting. And
Yep.
then for another particular player, it would all be about, blowing smoke up him and let him know how wonderful he is. And the point of the story was that each person is unique and you have to meet them where they're at. You have to provide them what's going to motivate them to be the best that they can be. That's the job of the head coach, along with the X's and O's, along with the preparation, along with the training. So very similar to what you're describing from Wayne, knowing that you have how many players on your roster, every one of them needs something from you, and you got to figure it all out. You got to be able to do that, be able to walk into the locker room and address everybody slightly different. Now the message can be the same, right? Like the message, for a basic example of a message, hey, we're all here together, working together to do something bigger than ourselves and to win matches or whatever it's going to be. But how you deliver the message, it's going to be different per each person. And again, those players that need a little bit more, or I mean, quite frankly, I'd be interested to see what you think about this. In my career, there wasn't very many that players that I had that were easy. Like every human being's complex and they all need something, right? Like I can't tell you how many players, because if you're dreaming of being a coach and you're like, man, it's gonna be great, I'm gonna stand in front of all these players, I'm gonna say X, Y, and Z, and they're all gonna buy in, they're all gonna do exactly. It doesn't work that way.
Nope.
Like it takes a lot of time and effort and one-on-one communication and different methods of explaining and different methods of motivation, and it takes a lot of time to get everyone sort of on board. Like human beings can't agree on anything, let alone what happens in athletics. So like that's why coaching is so important. That's why a coach exists, because if it was just stand up there and say, hey, we're going to do this and throw a ball out, like coaching wouldn't matter, because the guys would just do what they need to do, or the girls would just do what they need to do, or the women would just do what they need to do. So there is no easy thing. It takes a lot of work, and it's about communication. It's about getting to know those players and understanding what makes them tick, and then helping them grow to become the players they're going to be.
Yeah, coaching is such a unique profession, because it's a service profession. You're giving, yourself to other people and learning about them, and people don't necessarily realize how difficult it is, or how time intensive, or how, mentally exhausting it can be. until they actually get in it. I think we were talking beforehand how my fiance is my assistant coach for South County. The very first club tournament, because she used to bust my chops all the time coming from, these club tournaments, either recruiting or coaching. And I would just come home, shut off the lights, go to bed. She's like, it's 7 o'clock. Come on, let's go do something. And then she got into the world, and first thing she did, 7 o'clock, shut off the lights. She goes, oh, I finally understand. And we just fell asleep.
Yep. And then the other thing too, like what players don't understand, and they probably never will until they become, my age or coaches or what have you, is that you're going to make mistakes, and they're honest mistakes. Like I remember a player, got hurt and needed surgery, and his surgery date was a specific date, and that date came and went, and I didn't reach out to him. And the problem was that I never got notified. So I'm sitting here waiting to know when his date of his surgery was going to be, and no one ever told me. So I'm sitting there waiting, and I keep thinking, all right, well, they'll tell me at some point, and then I'll reach out and wish the lad luck and hope for the best. And it never came. And so all of a sudden, I'm a little bit ADHD anyway, but like you have all these things bombarding you at all times. So it just didn't happen. So then, he was really hurt that I never reached out to him to wish him success on the surgery and wish him luck and help him. And it was one of those things where he stayed mad at me for a long, long time. And we finally, after one of the alumni matches, sort of just talked it out. And he was just shocked that I never got the call to know. Like I just didn't know. And, you could argue that, you should have tried to find out. But again, if you understand that you're in a situation where you're getting pelted with information all the time and making decisions all the time, I'm relying on somebody to let me know when that surgery is going to happen. So again, he had hard feelings for a long time, but it was just a misunderstanding. And but I could argue it's a mistake. Like I should have reached out and tried to figure it out, and I just didn't, because I was trying to do other things. And at the end of the day, we're human beings. We're trying to do the best we can, but it was never that I didn't care about him. It was never that I didn't want to know. Like it just didn't happen. And of course, I regret it. I wish I could take it back and maybe save that kid some years of not being angry. But we all just make mistakes. We're trying to do the best we can, but we generally care about our players. Most coaches do. I mean, certainly there are bad apples, but you care about your players, and you want to do what's right for them, and you want to help them, and you want to be a support system for them. But sometimes mistakes get made.
Yep. Yeah. We always preach communication in our program for reasons exactly like that. Like simple mistake. You guys had that conversation, but it was years down the road, right? If he came into your office, be like, Coach, I was kind of hurt about you not reaching out. Could have been done in a week. You could have been like, oh my God, I didn't know.
Yeah, agreed.
So we always preach communication, and we've had some moments where kids just right after a game or after practice or something have come into the office, expressing their feelings, and then we share viewpoints, and sometimes meet in the middle and sometimes don't. But we always say communication clears confusion. So let's over communicate. That way we don't have to have this uncertainty in the back of our head about anything.
Yeah. And it's, I used to do that in my program too, but a lot of times they don't take it up. Like I don't know if you found that, but like I found, especially in my last 5 years, like there's a lot of fishing for information. Like, hey, talk to me. Like I want to help. Like that's what I'm here to do. Like if you don't tell me, I don't know. Like it's really that simple. If I don't know what's going on, I can't know what I don't know. So someone has to fill me in, and then I can make decisions. So it is challenging, because they are, 18 to 21-year-olds. It's a very tough part of your life. I know when I was an 18, 19, 20-year-old, I was not I call myself a shithead, because I really was. Like it took me a long time to get where I needed to go. But it's hard. So yeah, communication factor is gigantic. So what's one thing that a player should know that they probably don't? I mean, we might have just touched on it with communication, but else?
Talk to your coaches. But I think the biggest thing in my experience is your development as a player and as a person is pretty much 100% in your hands. Like you can, obviously have great coaches who teach you great things. But But if you want it, you have to go take it. You can't, if you're on a team that's not that good, you got to make sure that you're not that kid that coaches will look and be like, okay, that kid's not good. You want to be the kid, mostly that, you're on a bad team. The coaches are looking at you and saying, okay, he's on a bad team, but he's not a bad player, or she's not a bad player. And there's so many resources nowadays with the internet, and there's classes and online seminars and all these different things that allow you to develop very well. In my personal experience, I mentioned earlier that I was cut from the JV team. So I could have easily just been like, okay, whatever, like volleyball is not for me, I guess. But I spent, hours, much to the dismay of my parents, just passing a ball on a roof. Right. Yep. And especially being a little taller, people were like, all right, he's going to be a middle. And I go, but this kid gets to play all the way around. I want to be that kid. So how do I be that kid? They're like, learn how to pass. Okay. So, I took it in my hands. I taught myself how to pass. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is I see all too often players, blame their coaches. Oh, if I had this coach, I'd be a better player. Or, oh, if I was on this team, I'd be a better player. Or, oh, if, this circumstance happened, I'd be a better player. You can't control any of that. You can only control your own development. So take it in your own hands and really, go as far as you want to go. Again, if your goal is, going to the Olympics, I think you had Garrett Buckland on recently, right?
Yeah,
he was
GB.
talking. Yep, he was talking a little bit about how he has a path if he does great things and he wants it with the USVI. He can go after it, and he's someone who came from a little town in Rhode Island.
He's tiny too.
Yeah.
They had him at 6 feet at Riv, and I was like, that's a mistake. He's like 5'7".
Yeah, he's probably like 5'4" or something.
He's good though, damn good.
Yeah, he's really good. But another example, Frank Field, another Rhode Island guy. Yeah. He took his development in his own hands, and now he's in LA doing really good things. And again, he's not someone who came from, he came from a decent club team, nothing too crazy in the grand scheme of the volleyball world. He came from, URI club volleyball, which, we're not practicing every day. We're not, competing for national championships in Division 3 or D2 or D1. But he put in the work, and now he's out there in LA beating these guys who have had all those resources. So you can make all the excuses you want of why you're not a caliber type of player. But at the end of the day, if you're, someone who's been gifted all the opportunities, or if you're someone who hasn't been gifted any opportunity, it's in your hand to get as far as you want to go.
Yeah. I like the way you described that, because there's a couple things there that I really like. First off, good is good, right? It doesn't matter where you come from. If you can play, you're in. It's the beauty of sports in a lot of ways. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you came from. If you can play, you can play. And if you start exceeding, like, you're gonna people don't push away guys that are good or girls that are good. They play.
Yep.
Like, if you can play, you're in. Good is good. But I also like the idea of embracing your own future, because you're right, man. You're so right. Like, all of humanity's intelligence is on YouTube. Like, you can find anything. You can get information on anything that you want, and if you put the time in, good things are going to happen. Yeah, absolutely. You have the ability to find something on YouTube that helps you with training, and then you can go to Walmart and spend $10 and get a ball, and you can start figuring it out, like, what needs to be done, and it gives yourself an opportunity. And then certainly I would piggyback on there. Be a sponge. Anyone you work with, you're going to learn something from, and try to get, try to add it to your own, because a lot of the information that we all have, we're all sharing it, man. Like, no one created anything too much. So, take that information, make it your own, and then start building off of that. And what makes it your own is the spin on how you deliver the information, or how to utilize the information, not the information itself. But yeah, I love what you said there. That's great. Take hold of your stuff and go for it, because it isn't a coach's It's not going to be the coach's fault you don't exceed. It's it's not going to be anyone's fault except your own because you didn't put the work in. And that's a tough pill for youngsters to talk about, right? Like I actually go through that with my son a lot. Like, hey, like let's go work out right now. We should be working out. And he'll be like, well, I want to watch the show. I'm like, yeah, but that show's not going to make you any better. Like
Yep.
it's just entertainment. And I get it, man. Sometimes we need entertainment. We need to decompress. We need to, kind of take our minds off what's happening. And we talked about that prior to turning on the camera, where you can be overwhelmed with information and you just need to make it go away. Like I get that. That's why entertainment exists and that's why it's very popular. But you have 24 hours in a day, usually 12 really, to do whatever you want. And what are you going to do with those hours? And if you can take, 4 of those hours and make them towards making yourself better in whatever you're trying to pursue, it doesn't even have to be volleyball. It could be music, it could be art, it could be science, it could be math, it could be whatever it is. 4
Yep.
hours a day, 3 hours a day, multiply that by a year. Like now you're cooking with gas and cool things are going to happen.
And it's so goal dependent too. Like some kids just don't want it because they're interested in other things, and that's okay. Everyone wants to look at the kid who's at the top, but no one wants to look at all the work they've put in. So if your goal is to be that kid at the top, you got to understand that you have to make sacrifices. Like you can't necessarily.
Let's bring it back to Scott Grand Prix. Scott Grand Prix was one of the best volleyball players in Rhode Island. Like if we start talking about the top boys volleyball players in high school to come out, he's on that list. Yep. Right? Like Rocco's probably at the top, but like, Scotty's on that list. And that dude was not, there wasn't a moment he wasn't playing volleyball. Like he was always playing volleyball. He would be peppering something. He would be, he would set up a net and, he'd invite anybody he could to come play, on the grass with him. And then when he would play indoor, he was always doing it. I mean, he played basketball for a couple of years and then was like, yeah, I'm out. Like I need to focus on volleyball. And he went to go play at Sacred Heart, had a solid career, and now he's running New England AAU, and he's making all these tournaments happen and whatnot. But it all started with the fact that dude just loved volleyball and played it all the time. He never stopped.
You could find examples of that all across the board. Like I'm thinking about your famous setter that you had at Johnson and Wales, JJ Bassett.
Yeah, Jay.
He was on my high school team. He was my setter. He played more volleyball than anyone in our class. He was just a volleyball head for a long time and, really deep dove in it. I remember he was trying to teach himself how to hit lefty in the backyard because that's what, really quality setters did. I'm like, okay, cool. That's your goal. Let's go for it, man. He ended up really good for you.
He's the all-time leader in assists for men's volleyball at Johnson and Wales. I love JJ Bassett. I got two great stories. First one was when I was recruiting him. Like I went to go see him at a gym. I think it was like a summer camp, and I was like, "Hey, man, like Scott Reslow, head men's volleyball coach at Johnson and Wales, would love to have you come, be a part of our program." And as a libero, like I want him as a lib.
Yep.
And he was like, "I'm coming. Don't worry about it." I was like, "Oh, really? Like, I don't even have to talk to you." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm coming. I'm in." I'm like, "All right, cool." And it just so happened that his family owned a restaurant. And they wanted to go in that direction. The culinary was where Johnson Wales was. And it was a match made in heaven. So it all worked out. And then the second one was, and if he's ever watching, I don't know if he is, but I'll never forget, like he was lactose intolerant. Like he really didn't like that stuff. And so I don't know how you do it, but again, our budget at the time was pretty slim. So the best way to save money or to, really take that meal money and make it last a lot longer was to order pizzas. So a match would happen, match is over. I'd have one of my assistant coaches call for 12 pizzas and deliver to the bus, and we're on our way home. So get home fast, inexpensive. Everyone has pizza. So, it's halfway through his senior year. I follow the same card that I've been doing for years on years now. We get the pizzas. And I sit down in my seat. I think we had won. And I hear JJ pipe up, "Coach." Yeah. He goes, "Still lactose intolerant." But I was like, oh yeah, sorry about that, Jay. I was like, you take the cheese off, just peel it off. He's like, oh, I
Oh,
guess that's what
man.
I'm gonna do. I said, well, it hasn't changed in 3 years, right? He's like, nope. Good to know.
That kid is forever one of my favorite people in the world just because of the
Mm,
enigma he is. Like you
mm.
think you get him, and then all of a sudden he throws you a curveball, and you're just like, oh, okay, this is
He's
awesome.
he's very clever. He's very
Yep.
funny. He was a hard worker. And like he was also a kid that communicated pretty well. Like
Yep.
when things were going wrong, like he, talk back to our beginning of our conversation where we talk about communication a little bit. Like he was very good at saying, "Hey, coach, I don't understand what's going on right now. I need some help here." And then we were able to work it through. Like one of the problems we had a kid in our team named Sean Kennedy who had like a
Oh yeah.
50-inch vertical. Like the dude just flew,
Oh yeah.
and Jay had just a hard time connecting with him. Like it was weird. We're trying to run fast tempos on the pin. We're trying to really get that. And Sean was unique because Sean was, touching like 11.5. Like he was really up in the air. And then he was also small. Like he was 6 feet tall. Like Sean was
Yep.
tiny in terms of guys you think that would touch like that. And so we're trying to run tempo, and Jay's our setter, and he's trying to get it out there, and he's like, I don't know, man. Like just can't find him. And what we ended up figuring out was that whenever Jay set the ball, his right hand seemed to extend a little bit further than his left. And that was making the ball sort of do this, like sort of a curve at the end of it. And we just started working on it, and we sort of got to figure it out. But in the end, it didn't matter because Sean got to the point where he was just frustrated. Just send me a high ball. Let me go
Yeah. Oh
over
yeah.
people. And
And
we're like, all right.
that's meeting people where they're at, right? I was the exact same player. I didn't necessarily love tempo, but I felt pretty good about going up and challenging
uh,
blocks and everything.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, but Sean didn't have shots. Sean just went over people. Like
That works too.
he
That's
was
something I wasn't blessed with, but if you're blessed with that, ride it right into the
well,
grave.
it was just funny because tempo he would have been devastating. Like if he had bought into it and really we had gotten it figured out, because that's what I
Yep.
mean at the highest level of men's volleyball. Everything's fast. Everything's one ball above the pin, coming tempo hard, second and a half step, and what ends up happening is you get more split blocks and more the middle closing late because it's just too fast for most middles to actually make that move and get a good block up.
Yep.
And if you're passing well enough too, it becomes devastating because you have 4 attackers on 3 blockers and whatever the whole shebang. But the moment that you go super high ball, you're going to see 2 and 3 blocks. Like
Yep.
it just gives everyone time to move over there and set their block and do work. And Sean's whole thought was, listen, I'll jump over him anyway. Like it doesn't matter. And it took me a while to just buy into that because I was like, that's not how it works. But if you have a guy who can do that, if you have a guy who can, touch over everybody, like,
Oh, and he could.
yeah,
I
and he
remember
could,
playing those teams.
yeah, and
He
he
was
could,
talented.
and you're just like, all right, well, fine, this is what we're gonna do. And this is where like my experience got in the way because I remember talking to Kevin Harrington and Danny Green about tempo offense versus not, and both those guys were like, yeah, like tempo offense is where it's at because if you're just setting high balls, it's boring. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't want my team to be boring. I want us to be good. So I probably fought it longer than I needed to. But
Yep.
then think of the pressure put on Jay. Like Jay's now he's setting high balls to Sean, but our O2 needed tempo to be
Yep.
efficient because he's not Sean Kennedy. He doesn't have springs in
Yeah.
his legs that send him to the moon. And we had Brendan Baker who needed tempo on the right. So like now he's setting like 3 different balls for 3 different pins, and that's very challenging. And
Yeah.
it becomes but Jay fought it off. He did a nice job, and we were always in the mix, top 4, top 3. So but yeah,
Yeah. And
that
now
kid.
he's got an unbreakable record now.
He is
Yeah.
forever the top assist guy for Johnson and Weds men's volleyball unless they bring it back because you never know. No,
Yeah.
we live in the world of Marvel comics. Like no one's actually dead. Like they're
Oh
always
man.
brought back at some point. Uh, It just won't be with me, I don't think. But you know, cool, man. Any questions for me? Anything?
Oh God,
I've been peppering you, but
I feel like every time we talk and every time we hang out, I'm the one asking you so many questions, usually about like the men's game and the differences between the men's game and the women's game, all these coaching things. So,
that was that legendary ride home from Block Island.
oh God,
Where
I learned.
you had me ignoring my wife. She was ticked. She was like, "What are you doing talking to this dude?" I'm like, "That's Sebastian. We're talking volleyball." He's like, "You did it the whole ride," and I was like, "Well, you know, it's volleyball."
I learned so much about
Excuse me.
volleyball, the Reslos. That was a great ride. I very much learned so much about that.
It's awesome, awesome.
Yep,
Cool, man.
yep,
Well, best of luck going forward. I'll be watching, and certainly, you can always reach out to me if you want to.
absolutely.
You don't have to wait for me to get you on here, but certainly, man, looking forward to seeing what you guys do there, and also, I'll see you around the volleyball circuit, and really, thank you so much for your time and sharing some of your insights for our, for the ResV stuff. It's really awesome. Really excited to see where you go, and again, appreciate your time. Really do.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and keep doing what you're doing. It's really fun for, me to see all the people you're bringing in. And I'm
Hmm.
sure there's a lot of Rhode Island high school kids who don't necessarily get that exposure to that level of thought and in-depth coaching or whatever else, behind the scenes with refs and whoever. So it definitely is so much value to the Rhode Island community, and hopefully that lifts us up to new heights.
I hope so. I mean, it's for kids, players, but it's also for college players. It's also for coaches. I mean, one of the things that's happened this season that's been sort of interesting is I've had more people reach out to me that are high school coaches and college coaches saying, "What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" And that's kind of neat. I mean, it is sort of a nice little the way you described it, a nice little community that's looking to try to learn. Certainly, some referees have watched some of my stuff. I think my most notorious videos where I did a video trying to explain to parents what refereeing is like and what you're trying to do, and then like immediately a bunch of referees like you missed some things. And I'm like, oh come on, dude, I'm talking to parents. I'm not talking to referees. And
Yeah.
I'm an official for high school, a mediocre one at best, and and being able to provide information to parents, to anybody, I think helps in the volleyball world, because volleyball is, like you described earlier, no one knows much about it. Though, I meant to say when you talked about it, you started out as a soccer player, which is the number one sport played in the world.
Yep.
Volleyball is the number two played sport in the world. So you went from the top two sports that everyone plays in this little globe we're on. And not many people know
Yeah.
about the volleyball game.
Yeah, it's two popular sports for a reason, and they're both very fun and I very much enjoyed. So, but yeah, no, just the education for parents I think is so huge as well,
Mm,
especially on the ref side, because there's a ref shortage. We need more quality refs.
true.
We need to retain all the refs we can, and having some parent behind you barking at you
Oh,
because
dude.
they don't know the difference between a second touch double and a first touch double. Oh,
Mhm.
why you can't do that? It's no, you can. You got to know the rules.
Right.
But that's a lot of the reason why people are leaving the
Yeah.
profession.
Yeah.
So we want to retain the good ones, and we want to create more good ones as well.
And that was the whole point of that video, was like, hey, like if you understand how this works a little bit, maybe you won't be as aggressive,
Yeah.
yelling at the official who's
Yeah.
getting paid, minimum money to make sure this match goes off without a hitch. And you nailed it, man. I've been there. I've been on the stand, where an adult was so certain that setting the right way was incorrect. Like, he was like, it's a carry, it's a carry. I'm like, it's not a carry. It's exactly what the person's supposed to be doing. You gotta lay off here a little bit. But I've
Yeah.
also been in situations where I was reffing where the parents were like, as soon as I get off the stand between sets, the parents will call me over and like, hey, how does this work? Like, what are you trying to do here? What are you trying to do there? And I was actually really grateful. I was like, well, it works this way. This is why we're doing this. This is what's happening. Oh, great. We just had no idea. Now we can cheer better. I'm like, yes, now you're not yelling at me. And I
That's perfect.
appreciate that.
That's everything you could ever ask for.
Exactly. Because getting yelled at is not fun. I don't care who you are.
Yep.
It's not a great time. Awesome. All right, Coach Noordzy, really appreciate it, man. Stay well. Congrats on everything thus far, and keep kicking it and keep winning. And like I said, we'll be watching you, and yeah, get that new Mac title. Get after it.
Yeah, we'll be growing and we'll be working to achieve our goals.
Perfect. All right, stay well, sir. Thank you so much.
All right, appreciate you.